Hello. Hey, Fearless. It's Tiffany Young with Investor Life. We had one investor that is maybe, I'm going to say like maybe 6, 7 years into investing and said, you know what? I've made some money at it. That's good enough for me at this point, and I'm selling. And we said, really interesting, like good for you, no one to sell, no one to get out. That's great. But their reason for selling was because the renewing of their rents or their lease was stressful to them because last year it didn't go so smooth. So they have had, tenants in for a while. They had done minimal raises for the last, I don't know, 2, 3 years, it sounds like. And then last year they did a little bit of a bigger raise because the market has jumped a bit. And the tenants were upset about it and it didn't go well, left a bad taste in their mouth. And so, of course, our investors are now feeling bad about it and are like, we don't want to go through that again. We're happy where we're at. We're selling because they didn't want to face the tenants and the stress that came with it, because last year their renewal and raising of rents, and we generally do recommend raising every year. I used to keep my rents the same, thinking, oh, not much has changed. But between property taxes, insurance, interest rates, as we all know, even in decent markets, you generally are going up in costs as landlords every single year. So even if you raise a minimal amount just to kind of keep that up, we generally do recommend raising every year. It just keeps the bite a little bit smaller. And so, of course, a little bit easier to manage for your tenants. So yeah, you have to give your proper notices. You have to know your legislation within your province. You have to know, what's legal to be able to do in raises. Ontario and BC, you have your set limits already. Alberta, you can only do it once a year. Saskatchewan, once a year. So you have to know your legislation, right? But once you know your legislation, how do you raise rents? Let's say that legislation allows you to. You know that you've got a good tenant you want to keep, and you want to keep that relationship really good. That's what we're going to talk about today. So we've got 3 main points, 3 things that we're going to talk about: what we have to do before the lease renewal, okay? What we have to do in positioning when the lease is renewing. And then I want to talk about kind of the bigger picture in how we do that balancing act and how we kind of figure those things through, okay? Does it kind of give you a little bit of butterflies in your tummy when you think about doing those lease renewals? Where you're just like, first of all, I don't know how to set the rents. Second, I don't know what to say. What if they kick back? What if they decide to move? Like, do you get those little butterflies in your tummy? So put a thumbs up or a thumbs down, one or the other. Yeah, I certainly get those butterflies in my tummy. I've been doing this for 20 years and I still get those butterflies in my tummy when it comes to raising rents. I've learned to position things really nicely, and that's point number 2 that we're going to talk about, is the positioning, so that we leave people with dignity, and so that we keep our own dignity, and so that we protect our businesses. To me, the worst thing, this is really what spurred this training, is when, like I said, an investor that had a good property decided to sell it in a market that is extremely low on rental housing. And we know that Canada needs rental housing. That house is going to be sold to a homeowner, and that leaves the market because it's difficult for them to keep it and deal with, tenant issues. So we don't want to be leaving the market. We want to be holding on not only for ourselves and our investors as long as we can, but also just for in general, that people need places to live and we can give them nice places to live. So we want to stay in the market. How do we do that? That's positioning. That's number 2. We are going to talk about those kind of things. First off, when we have those butterflies in our tummy, I want to talk about why. Making sure that our extra expenses that we've had over the year get covered. So it's not just things like, the stove or the washing machine went. It's things like interest rates, have risen and taken our mortgage payment on that place from a reasonable amount to unreasonable amount. It no longer covers itself. Maybe it's now a negative property. We also don't want to scare off our tenants and have them move, right? We also don't want them to be mad at us and feel like we're taking advantage of them when they don't know the whole story. And we want to be a good human. We want to be fair. So I'm going to share my screen here. And here's my first tip, guys. My first tip is what we want to do before we have a renewal. We want to get ourselves organized. So first thing is when we have a renewal, we want to be on it, right? With talking to them and getting them renewed early. I am not the best at it, but there are some things that do make me a little bit better, and that is first being organized. So this is how I do it. Now, we used to use a property management software, okay? When we were running over 100 properties at one given time, we had property management software. We no longer need it and became tedious to use it when we don't have that many properties anymore. So I just use my phone. And so here's what I do. I put in a contact. So as soon as you sign a lease with someone, you put them in your contacts. You put in their, mobile numbers, you put in their, well, in this case, you can kind of see. So I've got their email, I've got a date in here, okay? So you can choose to have important dates. That is usually a birthday or an anniversary. On my Samsung, I can choose to put in other, and that's when I put their lease end date. And then it will let me know on their date that this has come up. Okay, I also do other things to remember that, but we're going to talk about these things first. I put their work info. Why? Because sometimes they mention it in conversation. Maybe it's not on the application, or maybe you're using single key and single key gets the application and you don't get all that info anymore. But it's really handy to have if you ever need to chase them. So I always put any extra info. It might be their employment, whatever it might be. I put that in. I also put in that they are a tenant. I use the word tenant every single time, and then I put the property address that they are. So tenant, 28 Campbell Road, and it ends on July 24th, 2023. Okay, I put in these things so that I don't have to then look for it. When I am needing to get a hold of them, I have it all in one place. Phonetic name, I just use that as their spouse or partner's name or roommate's name, whatever it might be. So all of these things, you can also add them into a group. I have a group just for my tenants, and what that does is it allows me to turn off my phone. Well, it used to. I keep my ringer off now 24/7, but when I used to keep a ringer on, it allowed me to say excluding these people after 6 p.m. or whatever it might be. So you can use all of these things. This is just in your phone. You're going to add them. Number one, add to contacts as a tenant every time, even if you can't remember their name, or even maybe you can't remember the address that they're in. You type in tenant, you scroll through, and you're able to find them. It says number 3, but it's number 2, is that you want to add their lease expiry to your calendar in your phone as well. So that for me is what I do. I add it in by the date. So June 24th, 2023, it will say that, lease ending for number whatever, such and such. And then I put in a 60-day reminder ahead of time that reminds me, okay, it's 60 days. We should probably get in touch. So the current rents, okay, so in this example, if it was this property with this tenant, I changed the names, by the way, and the properties and everything. So this is just an example one. So the existing rent here is $21.25, I believe, and it will probably be going to about $23.50. So there's a bit of a jump. It's not a huge jump, but that is in the very least what the market will say for this one. So what do we do 60 days ahead, right? So that 60-day reminder comes for next year. Hey, your lease is expiring in 60 days. Now, what do we do? For us, there's a couple of things that we do. And this is all positioning, okay? So we remember our goal is to raise the rents to what we need them to go to, whether that's what the market says or below if we can. Of course, having below market rents is always going to keep tenants longer and keep them happier. Also, we want to make sure that our expenses are covered and that we are running a business, right? We are running a business. This is a business that if we have to get out of, that leaves less housing for Canadians, which we know is already in crisis. So it's in our best interest as well as everyone else's to be able to stick around. So this is all positioning. Text number 1, email or text. Always good idea to have a paper trail. I know I mentioned this at the beginning, but even if you're having verbal conversations, if they're older or that's your relationship with them already, that's fine, but always send somehow a paper trail of this is the summary of what we talked about. And here's what it would look like. So your first question is super casual. So, hey, Christy, just checking in. How are you guys doing? You could be like, how's everything? How did the snow melt? Did the eaves troughs leak this year? Did that new dryer, is that working out for you? Hopefully you like it. Whatever it might be, right? We're talking to human beings, so be a human being. Your lease ends on the 24th. Do you know your plans? Do you plan to stay? So I never say, are you moving out? I always just say, do you plan to stay? We hope so, but I thought I would just check in. Whatever it might be, okay? So whatever your relationship is. The point is that your first text isn't technical. Your first text is super casual. Hey, how's it going? Your lease is ending. What's your plans? Just looking for feelers right now. Once they respond, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this part, you'll see the next text, your response is, okay, perfect. I'll let the office know and I'll get back to you, okay, in the next couple of days. So let's talk about, for a second, why are we saying I'll let the office know, or I'll let my partners know, or I'll let whoever know, my investors, and I'll get back to you. Who's heard of third partying? Third partying. It was our very first business coach back in probably 1998 or 1999, and she taught us about third partying. So who has heard of third partying? If you third party it, the idea of it is that you are taking the responsibility off of yourself. So with all of our tenants in property management, we do our best to not let them know that we're the owners or have ownership in it, because our job becomes a lot harder as self-managers when they think we're this rich investor. I would love if everyone was, but as well as I do as investors that it is tough to get into this game, and it's even tougher to stay in this game. So the view of landlords as all being rich couldn't be furthest from the truth. We know that, but they don't. If you go in there as the owner, they're going to think, oh, you can skip payments for them, you can forgive rent, all kinds of things. But if you go in third partying and you say to them, I'll check with the office, I'll check with my manager, I'll check with my investor, I'll check with my partner, whatever it might be, that whoever's in your circle, in their mind, takes away the power of you making decisions, which is wise to always check with others anyways, right? So the idea is that we're third partying. We're not saying, oh, perfect, here's a decision, and then have them say to you later, ask you a question, you go, oh, I have to ask my partner. Really? Because you didn't have to ask them for raising the rent, right? So we want to be consistent in our positioning, consistent in our messaging. That's the first thing, is why are we pausing instead of just going straight into, okay, you're staying, perfect, glad to hear that you're staying, we love having you as a tenant, here's what I have to talk to you about. Instead of doing that, we're third partying and giving it a little bit of space. Now, when we come back to them, again, that's your text number one. That is 60 days ahead of your lease renewal, ideally. Okay, if you miss it by a few days, whatever. But that's text number one. Text number two, a couple days later, okay? Give it a little bit of space. Let them start thinking, okay, well, our rent's probably going to go up. Let them come to their own conclusions in those things. Here's some examples, okay? 2 different examples of how to end it, but here's the overall idea. You go back to them again casually. Don't go in with some formal rent raise letter. I hate those things. Just be you and be in the voice and the personality that you were when you rented it to them. Okay, so rents have jumped a ton. It's crazy with interest rates going up or whatever it might be. You've been so awesome, though, that I'm happy to keep the rent below market value. Sigh of relief, right? You're immediately disarming and saying, I'm willing to do this. So the market's saying that I should be getting, and in our example, $2,500-ish for this place. I know that's a huge jump, and I don't need that. I just need this place to cover its own expenses, or whatever wording you want to use. I need this place to be fair to my investors, or I need this place to be slightly profitable, or at least not negative. Whatever wording you want to use, okay? You can make this your own. And you should make this your own. And then we're going to go into an explanation. We're going to include them in this decision, okay? That's our goal. From when you started renting to now, our mortgage payments, because I said interest rates, you could say our taxes, you could say our property management, you could say with us having to replace 4 of the 5 appliances last year, whatever it might be that's truth in your case, has gone up by XX amount. And you're going to share with them the actual amount. Your expenses, like this one, we just raised rents in one place, and we're like, the mortgage on this one went up by $450 a month. We are not raising your rent that much. However, it doesn't make sense for us to keep this house at such a negative. So you're including them in the decision. You're letting them see from your perspective that you are just human as well. Okay. You can also say stuff like, and again, this is just an idea. Okay. So you're going to edit this to be yours. Insurance has gone up, property taxes, whatever. My thought is to raise rents by that amount or somewhat close to it, which would mean, and then you'll say how much rent you are wanting, but I wanted to involve you in the decision. So here's key. I wanted to involve you in the decision because I truly appreciate how you've taken care of the house and the yard. Always include the yard because no one takes care of the yard. How do you feel about that though? Is that a huge stretch for you? Okay, so hopefully you guys have gotten out of that what you need to take. So all of those things come together to today, this being our regular practice. This is our systemized approach to rental increases, is we include them in the conversation. Another way you can say it is, what do you feel is fair? I wasn't planning on raising rents this much, but unfortunately with the rising interest rates or with whatever, we have no choice. So does that work for you? Is it an undue burden on you? Please let me know what you need. And it's amazing, guys, it's amazing how many people go, no, I get it, I understand. And the raising of rents becomes from a stressful experience into this, we're on the same team, we're working together so that you can stay in this house and I don't have to sell it and you don't have to leave and all these things. And I'm doing my best to keep it fair. And it's amazing. It's amazing how it works. One thing that investors forget, and one thing I didn't even know about until years into investing, was that we have to think of our investing, our properties, our rents, our raises, our cash flow, all of that. We have to think of it as a whole entire, look at the big picture thing. So what I call this for tonight's segment is we want to win the war, not the battle. So let's say that you increase rents and you do it despite what they want and they've had no say in it and you're unreasonable or whatever it might be. Chances are they're leaving next year, right? So now you have a problem on your hands. That doesn't help us win the war. It may help us win a battle, but not the war. And again, in real estate, the longer we can be in, the better we can be. The mortgages are paid down, our rents have gone up, the markets have changed, all that kind of stuff. So we want to remember that we want to leave them with dignity so that we're winning the war, right? That when they do move out, they leave the place beautiful, that we're not having a lot of work. We want to remember that next year's vacancy is being thought about this year. And so if we don't treat them right, it's going to come back to us. We want to remember too that if we give people a say in their rental increases, they feel like they've been part of the conversation. They aren't bitter about it. They understand. Most people are reasonable. So it's important to think of, and this whole kind of prospect is, even like in vacancies, people think, well, if I get a vacancy, I can get $200 more a month. Like if they move out, I can get $200 more a month. That's market. So that's great. That's $2,400 more a year. But if they were paying $2,400 and you have a month of vacancy, you're at even anyway. So think of it on an annual term. Okay. Think of it annually, not monthly, but annually. How much will I get out of this property if I do this versus doing this? And sometimes we forget to think of it that way. So you can book a call with us anytime. Most calls that we have booked are so that we can share information about our Ignited program. It's our mentorship, our coaching program. All these kinds of things are all built in. You get to ask your questions, to us directly when you're in our mentorship program. But regardless of that, if you're having a rough time, I feel like there's a lot of investors that are having a bit of a rough time right now. So I feel just compelled to kind of be like, okay, no, we need to kind of open that up a little bit more to just helping people. So if you're in a stuck spot, and 2 of you in Fearless in the last week have made posts that have let us know that you're in a stuck spot, so please reach out. So hopefully that helped you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I hope that it helps you stay in the market longer. Hope it gives you some tips and tricks. Igniters, we'll see you over in Laser in about 15 minutes. And cheers everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you next week for another Tactical Tuesday.